And we're recording. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today at Mula. Today we have a very special guest. Her name is Azzah Sultan. She is a multi-disciplinary visual artist based in New York City. So here we go. Hi, Azzah.
So much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, I'm so excited to be able to talk to you about your work and what you've been up to. So yeah, tell us a bit more, what's been going on.
Yeah, my name is Azzah Sultan. I am originally based, so my family's originally from Penang, and I grew up basically moving around a lot, and I've been in the US so far for 7 years now. I just came back to New York from Washington. I was actually just doing my master's in Washington. I graduated this May, and now I'm finally back in New York, and I think I'm ready to start making art and make that more of a full-time thing for me.
Oh, great. My family's from Penang too, so wow. You know what they say, everybody in Penang is related to each other.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, so it's really small. Oh wow, so you've been in the States for a really long time. Since you were did you do high school there, or did you do your bachelor's there?
I actually I moved to New York when I was 16. I didn't actually finish high school. I went to high school, so I moved around a lot. I grew up in Saudi, Finland, and Bahrain, and my last moment before moving to the US was I was back home in Malaysia. Actually, I went to Nexus International School, and I was there for 2 years, and around the 10th grade I felt like I kind of want to do art more, and I wanted to be more invested into it. And I applied to Parsons. I got in, and I did the foundation level year first. And so yeah, I moved to New York. I started college around the age of 16. I had my dad literally came with me for only 5 days and left.
Oh, wow.
So it was a very scary experience at first, but I think I really learned a lot about myself at that time. That 1 year being in New York by myself was really weird, because it was my first time away from my family as well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I went to Parsons for my undergraduate, and I did my studies there for 4 years, and then I was in New York for an extra year, and I worked as a program coordinator at an artist residency program. And I was still making art, but it wasn't fully fleshed out,
Yeah.
still very young, still discovering what my practice was. And then my visa basically ended, and I went back home to Malaysia, and I worked as a graphic designer at the Islamic Art Museum in KL for around a year. And when I applied for my master's and I got in, I moved to Pullman, Washington, and that was really when I started focusing on art as a career and as a practice as well.
Okay, so you were basically, before that, you were just trying to figure out your feet, where am I going to go with this?
I was more thinking of it at the sense of oh, I'm going to teach art, and just that. Okay. I'm going to to curatorial and stuff because making art as a living is something that's not really that common, and it's very and I mean, I really felt like I could do art on the side kind of thing, but it was only quite recently, through this year, I started to realize this is something that I can actually do. And I feel like now that I have all my savings and it's been a while.
Yeah.
I felt this is the time to focus on me, because I haven't really been doing that. And I feel like I have something to say through my art. And so, yeah, I feel like this is a very, it's a very strange moment, because I'm being more confident in myself as well. And sort of investing in my own future. And I have my parents' support with that, which is
that's
really
beautiful. That's really alhamdulillah, that's so good to have that kind of backup, that kind of support, especially from your parents. And then I know a lot of especially Asian parents, it's kind of I don't understand what you're trying to achieve here, because it's so ingrained in our society that being an artist is, you know, like the struggling artist fear, you know. And as parents, they want the best for you, so I guess, you know, that mentality kind of sinks in. So it's really great that your parents understand where you're coming from and, you know, what you want to achieve.
I'm very lucky when it comes to that. I mean, they allowed me, like, they were like fine with me moving to the US at such a young age, and like my parents have always been very invested in my art practice since I was very young, and I think I needed their like blessing almost for that little push to like be able to do art more full time now, and they were in full support about it, because I feel like they, now that they see that like I'm having my things out there and everything, they like this is something I mean, they know that it was something I was very serious about. Like looking at the outcomes of thing and like what I've achieved, they're like, this is something that you can really do.
This is like basically you're blooming, you're like your springtime right now, you're blooming right now as an artist, right? Like that's really great. So you said that you want to say something with your art. Like what is it that you want to say with your art? Because I think there's a lot of identity and like, you know, you linking it back to your heritage and where you come from. It's very grounding, I feel, and that's what makes your art, to me, even through like Instagram or like through, you know, technology, it's something that I think a lot of Malaysians abroad, because I've been abroad for almost 10 years myself, so for me it's like something that I understood and I felt very close to, because it was kind of like this feeling of nostalgia, like feeling of missing home, but kind of always bringing home with you, because there's a place of, you know, home within. So I just want to know, like, what were you trying to, like, you know, say with your art?
For sure. I think when I first started making a lot of art, it was like with the huge focus on it was like my Muslim identity, I feel like, and for a while that made sense to me, but I felt like in a way I've been subjected into a certain type of trope, especially when you make art and you're Muslim and you're making you're making art about your faith. There's a lot of like interesting sort of feedback that you get from that. You know, I feel like Islamophobia in like the US is like rampant, you know.
It's very real.
Very real. And in a way, after a while, I kind of was like bored of making art about, like, you know, my hijab and my Muslim identity. I'm like, I feel like so much more to me than just that. And I think, especially now, like in terms of their hijab, like I think we're tired talking about it. I feel like, you know, like having this like title, like first hijabi to do this, I mean, like it's 2020, and if you feel the need to like elaborate that this is the first hijabi to do something, that's a problem on you in a way, you know what I and I think I've always wanted to do art about my heritage and my culture, and I think it was something that I was very scared to do for a long time, mostly because like I was always in and out of Malaysia, and I grew up speaking English first before I grew up speaking Malay, you know what I mean? And there's always this fear where I always feel like I'm not Malaysian enough, and I feel like that's very common, especially when I meet other Malaysians in New York. It's always this thing where they're surprised that I'm Malaysian and Malay. They're like, wait, you are? And I have to like, I feel like I have to explain myself and explain my background. And I've never really felt a lot of support from the Malaysian community when it came to my art, until quite recently, which is why this is all very like new and confusing to me. I'm like, whoa, people actually like my work. And I wanted to explore it even more. And so that 1 year back home before I started my master's really helped me get more in touch with like my own roots and get more comfortable with being in Malaysia, because I've always been very shy to speak Malay sometimes, because I feel like my bahasa isn't as strong as it should be. And it's quite fluent, but you know, there's like always this hesitant to like outwardly speak because you feel like people are gonna judge you. And I find it quite common, but after a while I started, you know, get used to it and everything. And I would constantly go back to Penang when I was back home. And so every time I would make those trips, I would like just see the people around me and like, you know, visit family members and stuff. And I started documenting a lot of this journey, and I would film a lot of these um, road trips as well. I had a camera with me, so I filmed a lot of like the Pasa area and like, you know, when we're makan and eat and everything. I did a lot of like documentation just to like have on file. And I recently got access to my dad's archive of documentation. So he has been taking videos of me and my siblings when we were kids since like the start of the So I have access to this entire digital archive of just mini videos and pictures, and I really wanted to do something with it. And so when I started my master's, I started this series called Anak Mami, where I'm sort of investigating the idea of what does it mean to be mama as well. And that was a very important thing for me because I feel like people don't necessarily talk about that, and I feel like in a way mama culture is always like looked down upon at times.
Yeah, there's a lot of stereotype that goes along with like anak mami na. Yeah.
I think like because I know it's a term that people sort of use as like a derogatory term, and in a way I was sort of poking at the fact that it's used that way and sort of taking pride of that term as well and sort of reclaiming it because you know, Indians and Indian Muslims have been in Malaysia since like the early 12th century, and we've in a way provided so much towards the community and society in terms of building a lot of the mosques and the food and all of this. And the fact that a lot of the times, you know, there's still a lot of like colorism back home. I felt the need to like, you know, talk about the subject. So I did a series where I dressed as I dressed in terms of like the garments from both my mom and my dad. So I took a lot of my dad's songket and my mom's batik fabric and a lot of Indian style jewelry and Malay style jewelry. And it was a series of very intimate portraits of myself. And when I started working on those pieces and displaying them, I decided to print them on fabric just to really illustrate the idea of like the fabrication, the materiality. I started to realize that showing this in a Western context, I remembered that, oh, I'm an artist of color. And the position that I was in when I was doing my master's, it was a very like white, very male dominated space. And because these are very intimate, like almost like beautiful pictures of myself, like I felt very beautiful. This way, and I've never really felt like that, you know, in terms of like I had pictures of myself like with my side profile. That's something that I've been insecure for a long time, and like, the idea of like displaying like my beauty through like my nose and like the way I look and the color of my skin, I started to realize that through a Western lens, because I'm a woman of color, the way I look is sexualized and fetishized. And that was something that I felt very angry towards because I thought I was controlling my narrative, but in a way, people still found sort of like a hole or like a loophole to like exoticize the way I look, which was what led to my current body of work where I completely removed my face as a way for me to sort of take control of my image.
Oh, wow. And that's your Anak Dara exhibition right now, right? Yeah. Wow. I would love to see these photos actually. And it's really just going back onto you wanting to take control of your image and feeling really beautiful just for yourself, just to like finally feel at home with or at peace with, you know, whatever that you've been at tug of war with, and then to have another third party, you know, kind of control that identity and make it into something completely not what you wanted it to be, because it wasn't the point, right? Like, so that must have been, how did you negotiate that? Like, how did you manage to, counter that kind of, you know, the talk that was going around that body of work, or did you just be like, okay, I need to figure out this is they obviously, I need to take into consideration for my next installation or my next project, you know, like this is.
I think whatever I make, I'm still proud of it, and I still want to show it, because it's like, even though this community or this audience, they'll take it a certain way, it's not the same for every audience, you know what I mean? So I'm really proud of like my Anak Mami series, and like that's definitely something that I would like to display more in the future. One of the portraits is currently being hung at the Anak Dara show.
Okay.
I want to like, you know, put full focus on it, but I think what I realized was I think it was a push for me to make something that was a little bit more nuanced and more intentional as well, because I'm the type of person where every time I deal with a frustration, so this is a frustration I was going with, it really pushes me to sort of create something that's I would have never thought about before. I feel like kind of dealing with these stigmas and these stereotypes, it as unfair as it is, it allows me to see my work through the lens of like almost the male gaze and colonized gaze. And when I see it through that lens, I sort of tell myself, well, what do I want to say? And am I, in a way, playing into that lens? How do I deflect that lens? Because I'm a very stubborn person when it comes to like taking my own narrative, because I feel like it's very important, especially as like women of color, you know, this is something that we want to claim, and I don't want it to be seen through like a male gaze, and I want it to be fully like my own way of talking, and you're gonna have to deal with it if it makes sense.
Okay, that's dope. I find that's really, I think it's a lot of that's a lot to unpack even in that in itself. Like what was the, can you tell us what was the reason behind the name Anak Dara? Because Anak Dara means virgin, right, in our language. So what made you what was the series about that you know that you wanted to kind of name your exhibition Anak Dara?
I think as women, when we hear that term, we sort of feel a little bit of frustration towards it. I think when I heard it, because my mom would constantly, as a child, my mom would constantly call me like, "Oh, you're my Anak Dara," and I didn't really know what it meant for a while. I honestly thought it just meant you're my
young girl,
my blood, and I was just like, is this something that's just towards women, or like is it men as well? You know what I mean? Because if you're talking about like virgin, why is it superly like connected to like women and their worth and their like, you know, their own like sexualized life, you know what I mean? And I was like very unsure of the term for a long time. And
did you feel uncomfortable like hearing it? You were like,
I felt uncomfortable. It was just like, why is my mom calling me this? I didn't really it. And then when I realized why she called me that, she used it as like a term of endearment to like talk about like, you're my child and I'm gonna pass down my knowledge to you. And that was how she saw it. And in a way, that term that was super archaic, I felt like I kind of want to reframe this term into something that might be a bit more positive, you know? I think because like as women, we feel like we're subjected into like these ideals, like, you know, go to school, get a job, get married,
have kids.
Like,
you
know what I mean?
Yeah.
And my parents, I've been very lucky because my parents have always put our education first, and I've never felt any pressures in terms of like marriage and having to like deal with those type of ideas, because for them, like my parents, like they got married at like the age of 30 and like they had me 40, you know what I mean? Like for them, like education and their careers were really important. And my mom is like, she herself is like a boss, like like move to different places. She would like set up all these like events and shows to like promote Malaysian culture. She was the one that actually taught me Malaysian dancing for like 7 years of my life. Like, you know, it was like this, I had like this role model, and I felt like in a way like that term Anak Dara can be switched to this idea of like a woman sort of taking control of her life and sort of learning from her mother, you know, and like saw it as like a very like a matriarchal lens, instead of like a patriarchal lens where it means virgin. And
Yeah.
so I'm trying to like shift that narrative itself into this idea where I had my mother teaching me how to make sambal, which is what started out the show Anak Dara, where I made this video called Mamasa, where I filmed my mother teaching me how to make sambal, and it's just her hands. And I wore a green screen suit and completely erased my face. And I dressed up as my mother, and I started following her actions, and I'm superimposed in front of the video of my mom in the back. And I'm following her hand actions and everything, but I don't actually have any of the ingredients or the utensils with me. So that piece itself speaks to the idea of like the disconnection because of distance and because of being far away from home, but that reconnection because of digital media.
Mm. And food, I guess. Like you,
Oh,
yeah.
that food is like a huge indicator of
Yeah.
like, for
Yeah.
sure.
I think it's a big part of it's the heart of like every household, right? In
Yeah.
Malaysia, I feel like when I was overseas, we kind of like, as soon as we saw someone who's Malaysian, we're like, do you want to come over for like lunch? Or like, I don't know, it's just that kind of, we just bonded with food, right? So I think that's really interesting. And your mom, she obviously plays a really big part in this exhibition as well. Like a lot of what you have kind of, was she like the main inspiration for this set?
Yeah, I think it first started off as my parents. My dad is definitely still within the entire show, but I think it was a more of a stronger focus on my mom and the idea of womanhood as well. And what does that mean? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
The only audio component to the entire show is my mother's voice through that video.
Oh,
So when you enter into the show, you are hearing my mother, with like the mortar and pestle, pounding on the chilies, and she's telling me how to make the dish. And like when you hear it, you don't have to be me to feel like you're at home or feel like
yeah.
you're having a motherly presence. You sort of understand the moment. And it's been really nice because I've been having a few Malaysians come to the show, and like every time they hear, they feel like, oh, I feel like I'm at home right now. And
Yeah.
exactly what I want to illustrate within my work. So yeah, my mother is definitely one of the biggest inspiration throughout the entire show. One of the other installations is called Mambalot, where I have 3 different video performances, and they're encased into tube TVs. And I created these like boxes wrapped in batik fabric. And each video, sort of, I'm playing still on this role of being like what an Anak Dara is, and playing with my mother's sort of jewelry and her fabrics as well. So there's one video where I'm using my mother's sarong to sort of show the body. I'm wearing a green screen suit as well, and you only see the body through the fabric being wrapped around me. And then the second video, I'm playing with my mother's jewelry and with a green screen suit, so you only see the hands through the jewelry. And then the third one, I'm using a square scarf, and I'm styling it in the way my mother styles her hijab. And so it's almost like a floating tudung. And I feel like in a way it's sort of like a child investigating her mother's closet,
Yeah.
and
And just watching her get ready, I guess, as a kid, you know?
Exactly, watching her get ready, watching her like, and that itself is like, I think like a performance almost. And I decided to display that through tube TVs because it just gives another idea of like nostalgia as well.
That's beautiful. There's another one, you had like a batik installation, like they look like mannequins or something,
Yes.
right? Like tell us about that installation. That looks really interesting.
And it's basically, it started off as 3 self-portraits of myself without actually my face. It's just self-portraits of my outfits. So I mentioned earlier I used to perform Malaysian dancing, and I found all these images of myself and the outfits that I wore. So I decided to create like this very painterly, almost ghost-like images of the outfits only, and only focusing on the outfits. And I had that in my studio for probably like a year, and I had no idea what to do with them. And it was just like, chilling there, and I was like, okay, I need to start figuring out what my thesis is about. And I went back home to Malaysia, and I just started buying so much like batik and like songket material and spices and everything. Brought it back to my studio in the US, and then I started to just play around with the fabric in front of those paintings, and I realized like I want these paintings to come to life, and a way for me to do that is to stitch the batik fabric onto the canvas. And so that's what I did. So all the fabrics are hand stitched onto the canvas to
Wow.
into looking like they're actual garments, and they're coming out from like the canvas itself. So yeah, that was the most time consuming series for me, because everything was hand stitched on that.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And there was three of them, right? Or four? Three of
Um,
them.
and the middle piece is like the most interesting one, because I'm wearing a baju Melayu and a sampin, and the reason for that was because the performance that I was doing for that piece, and it was with my sister. My sister and I performed together.
Mm-hmm.
We were doing a zapin dance, and we were doing the very like masculine version of the dance.
Okay, okay.
Decided to put us into like baju Melayu and sampin, and I feel like that was like kind of like a very cool move of my
Yeah,
mom,
that's
because
like progressive, right? Like, yeah.
it really speaks to like the idea of like what gender is, and like the
Mm,
distortion of that idea of gender, and the fluidity of it too. And I thought that was really cool, and I basically added like batik fabric underneath that specific piece and have it flow down like the other pieces, just to sort of bring in the feminine like sort of
mm,
concept towards the piece. So in a way, like that piece is quite a unisex piece, and it like speaks as well to like the idea of the representation of gender through clothes, and like how that is something that can be sort of um,
mm.
twisted, like in terms of like who you are and wearing what you want as well as a
Yeah,
person.
that's really nice. So, like, obviously, you perceive identity with I think it's really hard, especially when you're Malay and you're Malaysian. You know,
Yeah.
the batik is like, it's kind of, it's a dying art, but it's kind of the heart of our clothes, right? Like it's a big part of our attire, right? And that shows through your work. So I find it really, I love, like, especially younger people, like wanting to bring that forward as well, like the batik, bring it forward, you know, because I think there's a lot of, it was kind of like missing for a while, you know, and it was kind of seen as like a dying art, or like people don't do it anymore, you know.
But
And
bringing back, especially like us being a younger generation, it's like
yeah,
reclaiming it, and in a way like styling it to how we feel comfortable with it.
exactly. And like repurposing the batik into something that makes sense to us, I guess, but also bringing a piece of that. So I think that that's like moving, right? We have like some kind of vector movement here. And the hijab as well, like it's really, it's huge, like not just as a Muslim, but I feel like as a Malay woman as well, like the hijab carries a lot of a sense of pride, and a sense of, there's a lot that the hijab carries, right? Especially in Malaysia, you know. So moving to America at such a young age, were you already with a hijab, like at the age of?
I actually decided to wear the tudung before I moved to Malaysia. I'm
Oh,
sorry, I moved to the US. Um,
oh,
yeah,
interesting.
so I got into art school, and I was just back home, just chilling for like 4 months before I had to leave. And I had a very interesting relationship with the hijab, because for the longest time I just didn't really understand it, and I
Mm,
didn't really see the importance towards it. And I was sort of the one where I don't think I'm gonna wear it, or if I
mm,
wear it, I get married or something. But then I
mm,
was really, why am I sort of subjecting the idea of the hijab through marriage? That's a little bit weird, you know?
mm,
And I started researching what hijab actually meant, and how I can like sort of put it into my own identity. And I think what struck me was the idea of hijab representing yourself as Muslim first, and being proud of yourself through that. And I think that was what really caught me, because, you know, I also wanted something to sort of ground me and remind me of who I am and what my faith is, because I was moving to the US at such a young age. I didn't want to get lost. I didn't want to like feel like I had to like acclimatize to something I was uncomfortable with as well. And like I didn't know how to deal with American culture too. So I felt like it was like sort of like a comfort for me to like put on. That way I didn't feel the need to stray away from like my ideals and my beliefs.
Kind of like a way for you to like your safety net, almost like
Yeah, it was
to cope with the culture shock. Would you say that?
It was like almost like a anchor for me to like remind me of who I am and where I came from.
Yeah, and you don't have to conform to other people's ideals just because you're in a foreign country,
Exactly.
and in a foreign place. Yeah, that's really cool. And you talk about Islamophobia a lot in your, I mean, in your past works that you've mentioned, explaining your, or feeling tired of, you know, trying to come out of the narrative that Muslim women are oppressed, or just because we have a hijab we can't do things, and you know, we can't be singers, and we can't be this, and we can't be that, right? Like there's so much conversation around that. Like have you personally experienced that, like in America or anywhere for that matter?
A
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah.
I think that's what led me to the type of art that I made. I think um, it was dealing a lot of like those microaggressions and actually dealing with a lot of like there were like 3 or 4 moments where it was like something that was very uncomfortable for me, and in public, and I you know, I dealing with that type of racism really like made me feel uncomfortable with my environment. And there have been many times where I've had to deal with it, and like when I'm dealing it as a microaggression, I like, okay, yeah, I can get over it, you know what I mean? But then when you're dealing with like a really like rampant racism right in front of you, and they're not even hiding it, they're not even trying to be subtle, that hurts a lot, because it's like you don't even know who I am, and you're just hating me what I look like. And I think that's what struck a lot of my work, because I was just very angry. And after dealing with 1 or 2 events that really changed me as a person, and I was very frustrated and very just upset in general, I felt like, okay, I'm gonna make work about this, because people just don't, I just don't see any art being made about it. And I want to be able to explore that medium. And I think always like in art school, being the only Muslim girl and like the only hijabi and like one of like the few women of color, you know, there are these ideals and these like tropes being placed upon you. And I wanted to be very clear that the art that I was making was not through like an Orientalist sort of colonized lens, you know. I wanted very true to who I was. And I think that's what led to my thesis work for my undergraduate.
Yeah. So you wanted to like walk in your truth, like this is mine. Yeah.
I did for my undergraduate. I did an installation where I made, I think like 4 video pieces that were focused on Islamophobia in terms of like the news media outlet, and taking specific phrases that people use to talk about Muslims. And it was very uncomfortable for me to do. I literally was going through hours and hours and hours of footage on news medias online, cutting them and editing them and creating these video pieces. Also focusing on the way speech and is being made after specific events, where it's targeted towards the rampant of like Islamophobia in the US. And so I made all these videos, and I had them displayed on TVs, mounted to my studio space, and they all played at the same time. And when you enter into the space, you feel so uncomfortable. And I've had a few people actually like cry in that space and like enter into the space and just left after a few seconds because they just couldn't really take it. And it was interesting to see, like, you know, people that didn't really like have to deal with these stereotypes, dealing with them in this space. And I think that's where I saw installation art as like a very powerful tool, and a lot of my kind of deals with installation now.
Yeah. Oh wow. It's really it must be quite, not mind-boggling, I can't really find the words for it, but like if you juxtapose your experiences in the United States, and because you're Malay, right, and you're Muslim, where it's dominant, it's the dominant like race, is the dominant religion around here, and then you juxtapose that around, you know, American, how your experiences are in America. It's a when it meets together, it's quite a contrast. Like it's black and it's white, you know what I mean? It's so yeah, it's really, it does happen a lot actually, especially in overseas, you know. And you start, I think it, in a way, it kind of gives you a reality check, you know, as a Malay
like,
woman. Yeah,
a little bit stronger as well, I feel like, because then you're like, I mean, it's unfortunate, but when you deal with those type of sort of moments, you sort of build a thicker skin.
Yeah.
And I think like microaggressions are just something that it happens, and I feel like I've been better at defending myself when it comes to it now, because in the past I would just let it slide. Now I'm just like, no, I'm gonna take you into account of what you're. So yeah.
And I think we also, it's a point of reflection, because now when you go back home, when you are the dominant like race and you are the one, you know, you start seeing it within your own community as well. So now, because you've been on the other side of you know, the fence, you're like, hey, you know what, this isn't cool. Like you need to stop doing all these things that we keep saying, because it happens a lot even in our own community, you know, and we oftentimes pass it off as, oh, we were just joking, or like, oh, we were, you know, it's just a humor, or it's just something that we say.
Yes, like we're just like messing around, you know.
Yeah, and I think it can become quite toxic in a sense, you know, because people internalize these things and they no longer they're sort of like immune to it, but it affects you and your value and your self-esteem as a person, you know. So yeah.
No, something that I've realized about like Malaysian community in general, there's a lack of, sometimes there's a lack of consideration as to like what a joke is, and like it's like sort of like borderline racist, you know. And like, I've noticed it with like Malaysians that I've met overseas, where I will be in a room and I'm like the only one that's like, I'm like considered dark to them, and so I'll be having a conversation and they'll say something and I'm like, oh wow, that was pointed towards me and you didn't even realize it, you know. And I think it's like, it's very important to be mindful of that, because you can't just make comments on the color of my skin but then still support what I do because I'm Asian, you know. People saying about me, and I think it's not necessarily just Malaysia. I feel like it's in like Southeast Asia in general, the amount of colorism and sort of racism that's really within communities, and you see in the US too, within Muslim communities as well, in terms of how Black Muslims are treated within Muslim spaces, and very dominantly like brown Muslims within the you know, prayer spaces and everything, and like the lack of consideration to Muslims that aren't brown, especially within the Black communities. It's very sad to see, and I think like we need to hold ourselves accountable towards that.
100%. So with that note, do you think you'll come back to Malaysia, like ever?
I definitely am always going back to Malaysia, like, you know, moments of like, I have some time off and some holiday. I try to come back at least like twice a year just to be with my family. But in terms of like my career and everything, I'm trying to see if I can make it here in the US for now. I definitely feel like in terms of settling and everything, I'm not sure about that. I think I'm also the type of person that's constantly moving around. So I don't even know where I would be in like, you know, if I'm in Malaysia or in the US. I have no idea. Person that likes to explore new things, and I don't think I've stayed in one place for more than like 3 or 4 years, and that's even in the US itself. I've moved around. So in the future, for sure, I'm putting in terms of where I'm being based on my artistic career. Malaysia is always home to me, and like, you know, my family is based in Malaysia, so I'll always be back home. I think with Corona though, I'm probably not for a while, which kind of sucks.
Yeah, and it's pretty bad in the States.
It's not safe to travel around. I've been very paranoid in a way, also traveling to the gallery back and forth. But New York has been we've been doing well in the entire like pandemic, I feel like. But you know, the second wave is gonna start hitting soon, so I'm trying to like prepare for that.
Yeah, keep safe, wear a mask, wash your hands, things like that, you know. Right, so I'm on my final two questions. So who are your top 3 female artists, either locally or internationally?
Oh, wow.
Okay, you don't have to stick to 3 because I feel like 3 is too hard, but you know.
For sure. Oh, that's a very hard question.
For sure, right? Like,
definitely Emily Jasir. I really resonate to her work, and she was one of my biggest influences when I was learning about art. Emily Jasir, Carrie Mae Weems, her kitchen table series was something that really helped me when I was making my body of work. The idea of like interaction through the kitchen table and through like sort of a family space. Chabalala Self, she's this really amazing fiber artist that does these like really great intense portraits with fabrics, and she's based in Harlem. She's really, really cool. Wengeche Mutu has been like my all-time favorite since I was young. That's 3. But if I want to put in one more person, it would be Mukherjee. I think that's her name, Mukherjee Makrani. She has this body of work where she's dealing with using fiber art to create like these like mythical creatures. And that was like a huge inspiration for my work. Oh yeah, and Arshia Fatima Haq. She was like, I had such a huge crush on her, and she actually went to Washington State University where I was as a visiting artist, and I got to meet her, and I got to have an artist studio, like a studio visit with her, and she got to see my works at like its like earliest stage, and yeah, that was like a huge fangirl.
Like starstruck, like, oh my god, yeah.
I talked about her work in my thesis, and so like I had to like keep my cool and like not act weird.
Yeah. Yeah, but inside I'm like, oh my god.
And I'm like, oh my god, you're seeing my work and you're giving me your thoughts and your ideas. Wow, great.
Wow. That's amazing. What advice or what message you'd want to tell local artists in Malaysia? Because I feel like what you're doing now is such a great it's great in a sense that like you're putting not just Malaysia, but like you're putting our culture to different, you know, different corners of the world. And I think a lot of us are very proud of you back home. So I feel like I should convey that message, because I know Mula and the team was really proud of you, which is why like when you said yes to the interview, we were all really excited. There's like a team of like 25 of us, and we're like, oh my god, like, yeah, it's really great. I really think it's amazing that young artists are like very brave, you know, because I think it is very brave, especially when you're in a foreign space and you're trying to take control of your narrative. And we've been that process of like decolonizing our own like identity is you know, is a struggle, right? I mean, it's been through generations. So I personally feel that it took a lot of work, a lot of introspection from your part as well. Being a third culture kid in so many different, you know, it's no wonder like it's a lot, you know, like where do I belong if I never really lived in Malaysia, but I feel Malaysian, and my mom and my dad, they're so Malaysian, you know. How can I not be, you know? And to stop doubting that and claiming that, really, I feel it's a lot of confidence given to people living abroad as well, because I know I went through that because I left a year after you, so like I left when I was 17, so I understand the struggles that you face. So yeah, can you tell us some?
Lovely to hear. I felt like inside into my brain, and I'm like, well, that's crazy. That's really, really, really nice to hear. Going back to your question in terms of like what advice I would give to like local artists, especially I think younger artists. I feel like there's not really much support for a lot of young Malaysian artists because it's not really a platform for us, and we've almost had to create the platform for ourselves. And I think like once we've done that and people are starting to recognize our work, it almost feels like, you know, you could have given us the support for us to like flourish our work already. And I think there's always like that sort of like feeling of like frustration. And I think something that I would advice that I would give is definitely do your research. That's like a very important thing, especially when you're building your body of work. What are you trying to convey? How are you bringing your narrative through your work? And are you being influenced? Who are you being influenced to? I think that's very important as well. And being true to that. Also, use the internet. That is your main source, and that is your tool. That's how I've gotten all of my networking, all of like my connections. It's been through the internet, Twitter, social, Instagram, LinkedIn. I'm not really, honestly, I don't really know how to use LinkedIn, if I'm being very honest.
I'm like super professional on LinkedIn. I'm like, yeah.
For art, it's kind of hard, but I think when it comes to like getting your work out there, definitely do your research in the collectives that you're interested in and follow them and interact with them and share your art on your Instagram. I think it's very important to understand what community you also want to fit in and do your research based on that. Especially with what's going on in the pandemic, it's not having your work in a physical space. Isn't the most important thing, you know. Learn how to like create things online, how to display your work online, build up your portfolio. I think it's very important to use sort of what's going on right now. People are making a lot of virtual shows, and what we're doing right now, you know, we're talking. That's important, and building that through your own narrative. I think it's also very important to understand that the work that you make is valid. No matter what you think, if you're making work that's very intentional and true to yourself, it's valid, and you don't really have to listen to people and what they say about it, because, you know, they don't come from your background, they don't come from your personal life. You are having your voice spoken through your art, and so as long as you're claiming that narrative, it's very important to you, then just go for it. Also, like art school, you honestly don't need it. I think I love academia, and which is why I went to art school and I did my BFA and my MFA. You know, art school can be a scam sometimes, and like as long as you know the books that you're gonna read and you know how to like have maybe a group of people that can critique your work, you don't necessarily need it. But if you really want to do like a master's and an MFA, there are so many options out there where it's waivers, and that's how I did my master. I didn't pay for my MFA. I did it through a TA-ship. And so yeah, never pay for your master's. That's a waste of your own money. They have a lot of money already, so don't give them money. I think definitely work harder and smarter when it comes to that, because art school can be very draining and very anxiety driven as well. And I think it's important for you mostly to build your group and your community than it is in terms of art school, because you can teach yourself how to make art. And there's so many resources online on art theory and the type of works that you're sort of progressing towards. So just do that research. And if you want to go to art school, don't pay for it. Find other ways and means to do with that. Yeah, that's
got it. Noted. Yeah, and the imposter syndrome, just don't even listen to it. Like,
I mean, I still have imposter syndrome, and I have to reminding myself, like, no, you know what you're doing. Like, I keep thinking, like, oh, I'm not doing enough. I should be doing more. But when you do that, you sort of drain yourself, and then you're not productive in your work. So I think definitely imposter syndrome it's not a good thing.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking to you. It's been great getting to know you and understanding your work and its meaning to you and what it can bring for everyone else. So thank you so much for spending the time with us today. If you are ever back in Malaysia, Mula would definitely love to do a face-to-face interview. Yeah.
Inshallah. I'm planning on coming back. I'm planning on applying for my artist visa next year, hopefully, and once that all sorted, I can come back to Malaysia for like a couple of months towards the end of next year.
Hopefully. Until then, please stay safe. Please, take care of yourself, and I wish you all the best for your the remaining days of your exhibition, because I think it's ending soon, right?
Yeah, it's ending this Sunday.
Okay. Congratulations again from Mula to you. We're very proud of you. Okay, keep doing the work that you're doing. I think it's important. So yeah, all right.
It's so lovely talking to you, and I'm really glad I met you through this.
Yes, I'm really glad too. Like, see, technology, right? Linking people together in a pandemic. Okay, like this is great. I love this. All right. You take care. Have a beautiful day ahead. All right.
Have a great night.
Okay. Okay. See ya. Bye.